Hello and welcome to this video. My name is Giovanni, and if you're new here on this channel, I like to talk about health, travel, more specifically New York City, because I can't really go anywhere else. I mean, I could, but I really don't want to, because you know what's happening in the world and whatever other fun things I can think of. In today's video, I want to share with you 10 things I hate about living in New York City. Don't get me wrong, I love New York City. I've been living here since 2007, so that makes me a New Yorker, I think. But nothing is perfect in this world, and that includes New York City. New York City is one of the greatest cities in the world. Some might say it is the greatest, but even the greatest are flawed. So here are 10 things I hate about living in New York City. Number 10, it's loud. So freaking loud. Because New York City is a city that never sleeps, people are up at all hours of the day and night being loud. Unless you live in suburbia, of course. The city is extremely loud. The cars are loud. There's, like right now, there's police sirens at all hours of the day. You hear that? That's the police sirens for I don't know why. If it's hot outside, expect the music to be blasting everywhere, because everyone is stacked on top of one another. A lot of the buildings, especially old buildings, have very thin walls, and you can hear your neighbors at all hours of the day. I have the misfortune of hearing my neighbors having sex every day at all times of the day. Last night I woke up in the middle of the night at like 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning, and I heard moaning, and it was my neighbors because they were having sex. They are so loud, and I am just so sick of it. So, if you are moving to New York City and you move into an old building, or whatever building for that matter, expect to hear your neighbors all the time. Number 9, rats. Yeah, not the mice, rats. They are huge. They're the size of my dog. I swear to you, I saw one the other day that was the size of my Yorkie. Rats are everywhere in New York City, outside of the subway, on the streets, inside of the subway carts, on the tracks, and the MTA doesn't care to get an exterminator, so they become part of the normal New York City commute. The next thing I hate, or number 8, is street parking, or looking for it. There's none in New York City. I personally don't have a car in the city, but my old roommate had a car, and she will have to wake up every day to move her car, because depending on what day it is, there will be street cleaning, so you have to move your car and park it someplace else. I once had to do it for her, and I spent like 30 minutes looking for parking in our neighborhood. Depending on the neighborhood you live, you can get a parking garage, or you know, pay for a month. But that could cost you a lot of money. You can pay between $250 to $600 a month. So that's another added expense to your bills for the month. Little story. Over the summer, I took a week off, and I was planning to go to another state to visit my family. So I rented a car for the week. Because of COVID and, you know, restrictions and such, I couldn't go to the Rhode Island, so I was going to Rhode Island. I kept the car for the week. So I parked the car in my neighborhood. I was looking for street parking. I found street parking. So I parked it for one night, and the next day I came back to get it because I was just gonna go back to work early. The next morning I come back to get the car, and someone somehow crashed into my parked car. I'm gonna insert a picture right now. I don't know how this happened. I don't know if this person was like extremely drunk when they were parking, but it looked like I drove the car into a wall, and I didn't, because the car was parked on the street. That's another thing you have to worry about if you park on the street in New York City, is the crazy drunk drivers. Ugh, I was so upset. I had to bring it back to the dealership early, so I lost like $500. Number 7, everything here moves fast. New York City is known as the city that never sleeps. Until the pandemic hit, then the city took a quick nap. But people here truly live to the name. New York City never sleeps, because they have that hustle mentality where you have to constantly be moving, going somewhere, doing something. And I just hate it, because sometimes I just like to relax, chill, sit back, enjoy the view, have a drink. Number 6, Times Square. I hate Times Square. I hate going there. I avoid it as much as I can. Times Square is the most touristy thing in New York City. Before the pandemic, it was constantly crowded. It was so crowded, I hated going there. And because it's such a touristy heavy area, everything there is super expensive. Expect to pay like $22 for a meal when you can find it someplace else for half the price. It's not really a pleasant place to be at. If you hate people, or if you hate being around crowded areas, don't go to Times Square when you visit New York. Unless it's like super early in the morning or late at night when there's no one there. Number 5, dining out in New York City is super expensive. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of cheap places that you could get a $1 pizza, or you could go to Grace Papaya and get a hot dog for like $3. But everything else, if you want to have a nice meal with some champagne or some wine, expect to pay around $50–$60 for yourself. If you're on a date, expect to pay over $100 for a meal for 2. And that's if you only drink like 1 glass of wine each, or 1 drink per person. So if you're somewhere in Manhattan and there's 2 of you, expect to pay over $100 for a nice meal. Speaking of expensive, that brings me to my next thing that I hate in New York City, which is high rent. Depending on where you live in New York City, expect to pay around $2,000 for a small studio that barely has a kitchen. Rent prices in New York City are insane, and you're usually paying for the area that you live on. So unless you have rich parents or you have a lot of savings, expect to live with around 2 to 3 people in order to afford to live in a nice area. And even with roommates, expect to live in a very small room, and expect to work 2 jobs or more in order to be able to afford the rent or the cost of living in New York City. And while we're talking about rent, let's talk about small apartments. That is the number 3 thing that I hate in New York City. Small apartments. There is no space in New York City. If you want space in New York City, you really have to go outside of the city, live somewhere in Long Island, or live all the way uptown. There's nothing really bad living uptown. It's just like a far commute. If you work in Midtown or live downtown, you expect to be on the train every day for like 45 minutes to an hour. So just know that, you know, there's not really a lot of apartments here are really small. You're paying a lot of money, but not for the space. You're paying for the area. You're not paying for the space. Unless you have money, then you're paying for a nice apartment. But if you're moving to New York City from small town USA and you don't have a lot of money, don't expect to be living in a massive bedroom. You will be living in a shoebox, unfortunately. I live in a very tiny studio apartment. I love it, but you know, it's tiny. So just know that unless you're paying a lot of money, $3,000 for a studio, you will not be getting a lot of space. Next thing that I hate, crowded subways. There are 472 train stations throughout the 5 boroughs of New York City, and 27 train lines which operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that is still not enough to accommodate the 8.4 million people that live in New York and commute every day, 24 hours a day. The trains are still crowded. Even with all the train stations and all the trains are constantly crowded, especially during rush hour when people are going to work or coming back home from work. During the pandemic, I had to take the subway every day because I had to go to work. I was considered an essential worker, and that was the only time before the pandemic I could never get a seat on the subway in the morning. And once the pandemic happened and everything shut down, that was the only time that I was able to get a seat going home or coming back home during rush hour because there was nobody on the train. While we're talking about the train system, let me talk about the #1 thing that I hate about living in New York City, and that is the MTA. One of the good things about living in New York City is their 24-hour subway system, but that subway system is ran by the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, which is also known as the MTA. The MTA is a $16 billion company that is constantly raising their prices for train fare to fix things, but nothing ever gets fixed. There's a lot of delays. Literally every day there's a delay on the trains. The tracks are never working. They never fix any of the tracks. Every weekend they shut down the train line that I need to get places because they're fixing the tracks, but nothing ever gets fixed. During the pandemic they decided to clean the subways, but then they stopped, and now things are going back to normal and everything is dirty again. So MTA, get it together, please. I'm paying a lot of money. Get your life together. But even with so many flaws, New York City is still one of the greatest cities in the world, and I wouldn't wish to live anywhere else. Actually, in a year. Maybe I will in a year. But for now, I really love living here. So if you live in New York City, is there something that you hate that I missed? Comment down below and let me know. Or if you've been here and you hated something that while you were here, comment down below and share with the world, with everyone else that's watching. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment, help the algorithm push this video to more people. It will help me grow, so I am really grateful for that. I post videos every week, so I hope to see you next week. Until next time, bye.